Welcome back to the Renaissance Room podcast. I am Katie, your host, boudoir photographer, professional mythbuster, and your reminder that your body was never the problem. It was just the way you were taught to see it, babe. Today, we are talking about one of my favorite things to discuss. And if you have already visited my website, you will be familiar with some of this. If you know me IRL and you've literally interacted with me in any way, shape, or form in the last 5 years, whether we've grabbed coffee or lunch or we've DM'd on Instagram, you have heard me talk about this topic, okay? I love chatting about it. Today we are talking about the patriarchy. And for some of you, that word might feel yucky, okay? Maybe some of you are like, the patriarchy. I hear about it all the time. I don't care. Or maybe the word patriarchy feels like something that you only learned about in gender studies in college. Or maybe you're like, ugh, here Katie goes again. She's about to get political on this podcast. And if that is you, I encourage you to keep listening, because what we're going to talk about today isn't just the patriarchy. We are going to break it down, like, what is it? How does it impact the world? How does it impact you as an individual? How does it impact your gender? But we're also going to talk about how the patriarchy impacts your body image specifically, because your body image is not personal. Your body image is political. So inherently, boudoir is a political thing to discuss. It's political because it is talking about women's bodies, or humans with uteruses, right? The world has decided those bodies are political. So if politics gives you the ick and you don't want to hear about it, that's fine. Maybe boudoir actually isn't even for you. But if you're even just 1% curious to hear what these two things have to do with each other, take a seat, keep those ear pods in, and come on a little ride with me. We're going to talk all about it today. Here are some things that you may not have realized are the patriarchy in your life. So the very first one, and we're going to talk about this in so much detail, but the very first thing is that inner critic, the critic who says you're not small enough, you're not pretty enough, you're not thin enough. Those are not your own voice, okay? That is the voice of the patriarchy. The patriarchy is a very, very old system, which means it has been in place since you were a little person, okay? Even as early as when we are children, if you are born a girl and you see your grandparent or an uncle or aunt or a new adult, right? You are most likely going to hear things from those adults, even at a young age as a girl, about your appearance. You're going to hear about, oh, look at that cute dress. Oh, look at your cute hair. Oh, those are such pretty shoes. Immediately, from such an early age, we are talked at and to about our appearance. But little boys get a different conversation from adults. They get to hear, oh, what are you doing there, little Tommy? Are you playing with trains? Do you like trains? Do you find trains interesting? Do you like cars? What do you like to do? It's hardly anything ever about their appearance. So even when we were little, before we could even fathom what this system is, it is infiltrating our lives. It is in the systems and the atmosphere that we live in when we never consented to it even. Another example that you may have experienced as an adult woman in the patriarchy is if you work in an office or really any job that has men in it, which is probably every job if we're being real. If you have ever been asked to do something like take notes in a meeting or help plan the baby shower for another woman in the office, and your job description has nothing to do with something like event planning, that is the patriarchy. If your male boss says, hey, Katie, Susan's due in 3 weeks, can you put together some kind of baby shower thing for her? And your job is CFO, no, that is a patriarchy. That is an assumption of the system that we're going to talk about in a second, that you, the woman, underneath this male on this ladder of the patriarchy, is going to do this unpaid labor, this assumption that you, because you're a woman, this particular skill set you have you can do this without pay, without recognition, without acknowledgement. So there are probably things that happen in your office every day that feel like that. For me, one of the things that I experienced incredibly frequently as a wedding photographer was that I obviously owned my own business. I sometimes brought a second photographer with me if I needed a second pair of hands. I think every second photographer I've ever worked with is a woman. And a lot of times we would also work a wedding with a videographer or a team of videographers. And 8 out of 10 times, those videographers were men. And I totally understand that from the perspective of the guests at the wedding or other vendors at the wedding or the staff at the venue. I totally get that all they see are like 4 or 5 people with cameras. They have no idea which camera is doing video, what's doing photo, do they work together? They don't know. But this thing that used to happen, 70% of the time that I worked with male videographers is that when it came time to feed the vendors, so usually like the DJ or the band and the photographers and anyone else who's working the wedding and has had like a 10-hour day, we usually get to eat a meal during like a 12-minute break. It's ridiculous how fast you have to eat these meals. Don't even get me started. But usually we get some kind of break and a meal provided for us. And when that would happen, usually the coordinator or someone from the kitchen would come and find us and say, hey, your meals are ready in the blah, blah, blah room right now. And we would be like, great. 70% of the time, whoever was coming to tell us that the meal was ready, if we were working with male videographers, would only come over to tell the male videographer that our meals were ready because they assumed that I worked for him. They just saw a bunch of cameras and they said the person in charge who's signing the paychecks must be that guy with the camera and the penis. And all those other people must work underneath him. He must be in charge. It used to grind my gears. It drove me nuts. And it happened so often. And it was just the tiniest little thing that you would think, oh, Katie, get over it. It's not that big of a deal. But that's kind of the point of the patriarchy. The patriarchy doesn't just live in the big moments that we see in the headlines. The patriarchy lives in the everyday. It lives in your homes. It lives in your offices. It lives in your relationships. It lives in your relationship with yourself even. And the system gets to say who gets to lead and who has to follow, who gets to take up space and who has to shrink. And there are so many reasons why it's such a successful system. If you heard all of that and you still can't think of an example in your life that you feel like the patriarchy impacts you, keep listening because we are going to talk about, for the rest of this episode, how the patriarchy is influencing the way you feel about your body. And I think we should start with a basic definition of the patriarchy. At its core, what the patriarchy is a system where men are in power and everyone else is expected to fall in line in that system behind that person in power. Sometimes I think about it like a pyramid. Sometimes I think about it like a ladder. But the core of what the patriarchy is a system where men benefit and everyone else eats the crumbs left behind. And I know that there's a lot of discourse out there about, oh, but it's not all men. And I totally get that. What we are talking about today in this episode is not about an individual man. It is about the system and the way that the system conditions the men in our lives to uphold the system. So I'm inviting you again, if you are somebody who's like, patriarchy, then I promise you I'm not coming for your loved ones individually. I am not coming for your husband. I'm not coming for your dad. I'm not coming for your colleague that you really like who's one of the good ones, okay? I'm coming for the system and the way that it makes women feel about their bodies. And one of the sneakiest ways that the patriarchy retains power is by convincing women that their bodies are the most important thing about them, while simultaneously telling women their bodies aren't good enough. And here's why that's so powerful. Because if we as women are spending time worrying about whether or not our thighs touch when we stand up, or if we can get into that 6 p.m. Pilates class tomorrow, or counting our calories, or cutting out carbs and bread, if we're thinking about that shit, we're not running for office. We're not organizing. We're not demanding equal pay. We're not taking care of our communities in need. We are distracted, and that is by design. That is the patriarchy's purpose, to keep us worrying about those things, about our bodies, and not about the ways that we could also have some power in this system, in this structure. And if you walk away from this episode with just one thing, let it be this: your insecurities don't exist by accident. They exist by design. They exist by purpose. They are not your fault. They are not your original thoughts. You were taught to feel this way about your body. We already talked about that example of, from a very young age, women and girls hear about how important their appearance is. And even if no one was saying this out loud to you when they were telling you that your dress looks so cute, or you heard your mom saying something nasty about herself and her body in the mirror when she looked in the mirror before going to the beach, even though nobody in those scenarios were saying this exact sentence out loud, what was written in between the lines was that your body is the most important thing about you. Your appearance is the most important thing about you. What you look like is the most important thing that you can bring to this universe. And here's what's so genius about that. I mean, you got to give the patriarchy some credit. It's smart. It's a smart system. What is so genius about that is that if you grew up believing that your body is a problem to be solved, you are going to spend your whole life spending your money, spending your time, spending your energy on figuring out how to quote unquote fix that. And all of those resources that you're spending on your appearance, and I say you as in like you and me, babe, because me too. All that time and money and energy we're spending on these things about ourselves, they're not going to things like getting equal pay. They're not going towards our power, our voice, our impact that we could make on the world. And that's a fucking bummer. You want to know what else is pretty genius about the way the patriarchy works? Again, credit where credit is due. The patriarchy is always moving the fucking goalpost. They are always changing what the beauty standard is that we are supposed to achieve. In the 50s, everyone wanted to look like Marilyn Monroe. A little bit of curve here and there with a tiny little waist. In the 90s, everyone was supposed to be a size 0. In those 40 years, we completely changed the way that women are supposed to, quote unquote, look to be deemed attractive, acceptable, and an important part of society. The pattern is that the goalpost is always moving. The beauty standard is always unattainable. So we're just going to keep on spending that money and that energy and that time on reaching the next beauty goalpost. We're going to dive way deeper into the beauty industry because it's another like super juicy episode. So this is just sort of your like appetizer to this idea of moving goalposts, beauty standards, how the patriarchy tells us one way to look and then switches it, does a little bait and switch. So yeah, look forward to a more in-depth episode about beauty standards. Another topic we're going to do an entire episode on at a later date is something called the male gaze. And that is the idea that the patriarchy is teaching us to look at our bodies through the eyes of how men might look at us, like an object, okay? And I don't want to get into it too much because I want to go into more better detail about it and like treat it with the care it deserves because it's such an interesting topic. But the concept is that when we look in the mirror as women, it is so ingrained in us to look in the mirror and wonder, do we look thin enough in this dress? Would someone want to go on a date with me in this dress? Am I fuckable in this dress? Like, even if your brain isn't saying that specific sentence, like somewhere underneath there, what you're questioning is, am I worthy of a man's attention? And what does a man want to give his attention to? So that's just, again, another way that the patriarchy is impacting what you're seeing in the mirror. But the general headline of why that impacts you so much as a woman is that we have been taught to perform our bodies for someone else's approval, for someone else's acceptance, for someone else's validation, instead of inhabiting our own bodies for our own experiences. So we're going to dig into that in a future episode. One more thing I want to talk about in the like umbrella of patriarchy and body image is the good body versus the bad body. The patriarchy loves a hierarchy, right? That is how it works. They love a ladder, right? The whole thing is a ladder. And of course, the patriarchy has created a ladder, a hierarchy for bodies. There are good versus bad things in bodies, according to the patriarchy. Thin bodies are better than fat bodies, according to the patriarchy. Young bodies are better than old bodies, according to the patriarchy. White skin is better than dark skin, according to the patriarchy. Able bodies are better than disabled bodies, according to the patriarchy. And all kinds of tiny little things like smooth skin versus rough skin, or clear skin versus skin that's breaking out. There's all of these good versus bad, good versus evil things about bodies, natural human bodies. The beliefs and feelings we have about these things, about the way our bodies look, how old our bodies are, how able-bodied our bodies are, what color skin we have, they are all parts of this ladder that the patriarchy has created. And they want you to keep trying to climb that ladder. But they've rigged the ladder in a way that it is an endless, never-ending ladder. You can keep trying to climb it to get to the top, but you will never make it there based on the way that they have rigged the system for us. So now that I've left you all feeling hopeless, I hopefully have some tiny, small first step solutions for us. And really the biggest way you can give the patriarchy a big fat middle finger is learning to love yourself, despite the fact that all the patriarchy ever does is try to explain to you why you should hate yourself. And boudoir photography is a great way to do that. It is one of the most radical things you can do, to say, I love myself just as I am, even though every single place that I look, I am told I am not enough. It's radical because the system needs you to hate yourself to succeed, to keep going. The system needs you to want to keep spending that money on stuff that makes you think that you're broken. They need you to keep feeling like you're not enough. The beauty industry needs you to hate yourself so you'll buy their products. The diet industry needs you to hate yourself so that you'll use whatever their programs are for you to lose weight. The fashion industry needs you to hate yourself so they can keep selling you different outfits, different clothing, different options for your body type, or whatever it is that they're constantly peddling to get you to spend your money and your time and your energy on fixing yourself. The patriarchy needs you to stay small and silent and unaware of this to maintain power. So a woman who loves herself, a woman who likes herself even, you could even start with that. You don't have to love yourself tomorrow. You could even just start with liking yourself. A woman who likes herself, that shit is dangerous to the patriarchy. That is a threat. So when we do something like a boudoir shoot, we are choosing to believe our bodies, our minds, our talents, all of the parts of us are worthy, despite the fact that maybe our body doesn't look the way that the society that we live in wants it to look. That's not just a personal choice. That is resistance. That is resistance to decide, I'm going to like myself. I might even love myself without fixing, without changing. Just as I am right now, I love myself. That is powerful. That is the most powerful thing we can do to combat the patriarchy on an individual level and like a bigger level, which is why I'm out here trying to be like, boudoir, boudoir, boudoir. Like, it's the answer. Patriarchy, the antidote is boudoir. Because if boudoir is done right, it is an act of resistance. It's not just about being sexy. It's not just about being perceived. It is about loving yourself and believing that you are worthy just as you are. And if you can let yourself be seen in a boudoir session and see yourself as art, you are rejecting the patriarchy. Every single time you look at your boudoir photos and say, my body is a work of art. My body is not a problem to solve. My body is a masterpiece. You're saying, I don't need to be smaller to do this. I don't need to be smoother. I don't need to be younger. I am enough as I am right fucking now. And that is revolutionary. And I truly believe that this world cannot continue to be ruled under a patriarchy if every woman on this planet knew and understood how worthy they already are. Whew, okay, that felt like a lot of information, and I promise I actually tried to make this episode like, patriarchy is fun and light and airy, but it's not. I feel like I just tried to tell you guys like, oh, The Handmaid's Tale is such a fun, awesome show, and then it's not. It's dark as fuck. But I hope you learned a couple things, and if you're like reeling right now of like all this information is new and like, wow, I can't believe this, then let me give you the SparkNote version. Nothing is wrong with you. You didn't choose to be insecure about your body. This system has taught you to be insecure. Your body image is not a personal failing. It doesn't make you a bad person. It doesn't make you weak. You are not broken. You are living in a system that profits and benefits from you believing that you are broken. Your body insecurities are not your fault. They don't belong to you. They were learned from a system that you were born into. It does not make you vain or a bad feminist or any other negative things that your brain might be trying to tell you right now that you care about how you look or what size pant you wear. It's the work that I do in the Renaissance Room through Boudoir and photography. It's the work that I'm hoping to do through this podcast to help you see that you don't have to participate in that system anymore. It's hard. It's really hard to unlearn this shit. That's going to be some other episodes about how do we unlearn all of this inherited belief about our bodies. It's not easy work necessarily, but I personally think that it's worth it. It's well worth it. We're going to talk about other episodes about the details of that male versus female gaze that I talked about. I'm sure that some of you are going to end this episode and be like, well, what am I supposed to do about it other than book a boudoir shoot? And the answer to that is to keep learning, to keep thinking about, why do I have this belief about my body? Why is this here? Is it actually my belief, or is it something I was told to feel about my body? And remembering that every single time you make a conscious choice to say, I actually don't mind my belly today, or I don't really care that I have a zit on my chin today, or any beauty standard situation that usually would make you feel unworthy, every single time you can look at that thing and say, doesn't actually change what I bring to the table. Doesn't change how good of a parent I am, or how good of a friend I am, or how good of a colleague I am, or how good of a human I am on this planet. That extra 10 pounds has nothing to do with that. Boudoir certainly is one thing that you can do to combat some of this, but if that's not in the cards for you right now, then these tiny little acts of resistance when you look in the mirror and retraining your brain of how you talk about your body is the most revolutionary thing that you can do. So, with that, stay tuned for future episodes about more details about this. And together, because I also struggle with this stuff, together we can work on how to break some of these thought patterns. How can we start looking at ourselves and our bodies through the female gaze instead of the male gaze? How can we unlearn some of these beliefs that we have about ourselves? The first step is understanding where the beliefs come from, which is what we did today. So I hope you found this interesting. I hope you didn't find it like I was screaming at you. Because sometimes when I feel like I talk about the patriarchy, I feel like I'm like screaming at everyone because I'm so mad about it inside. I'm so mad. Sometimes I have to talk about it through this like super angry tone, which is very something that the patriarchy doesn't want me to do. So that in itself also feels revolutionary. To talk about it with such anger and frustration and passion is another way that you can continue to sort of undo some of what the patriarchy has left us with. So feel free to tell me in the comments if you have any of those stories, like some of the ones I told in the beginning of this episode about how patriarchy has impacted you in your day-to-day. I would love to hear from you. Tell me how these tiny little microaggressions happened at your workplace or in your home or in your family. And because the more we all talk about it, the more we can normalize it and the more we can start identifying when it comes up so that we can keep being revolutionary badass bitches and dismantling this system that is not here to benefit us. So let your mantra for the rest of this week be, my body is not a problem. Because it's the system, babe. The system's the problem. All right, until next time, keep dismantling the system one body image issue at a time, my loves. And I'll see you for the next step.